It's Saturday, so let's talk Zatch Bell. Hi, hello, my name is Ash and welcome to Pages in the Stars. If you're new here, hello. If you're returning, welcome back. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below so you can be alerted to all my bookish, not bookish, and sometimes ranty content. A couple of months ago, I started a series where I decided I was going to break down, review, and discuss my favorite manga and anime, Zatch Bell. So that's what I'm continuing today. We're going in-depth into volumes 5 through 8, so let's dive on into it. So we begin volume 5 with Kyo and his big plans to go visit his dad in England over his summer break. Kyo doesn't get to see his dad often because his dad is a professor at a university in England. The next few pages show Kyo doing various things with his friends before he goes off to England to see his father, and this was super important because at the beginning of the series 4 volumes ago when we first met Kyo, he didn't have any friends, he didn't want to make any friends, he didn't want to talk to anybody, he was cursing at his mom. Kyo was a mess at the beginning of the series, and not to say he isn't a mess anymore, but he's working on it and he's showing a lot of character development, which is great because Kyo at the beginning of the series is this depressed, friendless 14-year-old, and we're starting to see him, come out of his shell a little bit more and open up to other people. And the catalyst for all of that happening was Zatch coming into his life. So it's really cool to get to see Kyo interact with people and have friends. That's something that we didn't get to see until now. I said it in the first video that Kyo sucks at the beginning of Zatch Bell. So to start seeing this character development where he has friends, he's opening up to people, he's trying to spend time with others instead of keeping himself closed off and by himself was really nice. So we get to see him doing all these fun things with his friends. We also get this scene where he's talking to Tia and asking Tia questions about what was Zatch like in the Momoto world, because Kyo has no clue. Zatch has no memory of what his life was like in the Momoto world. So Kyo's trying to piece things together via friends that Zatch had or people that Zatch knew in the Momoto world, and one of those Momoto is Tia. So Kyo asks Tia, what was Zatch like in the Momoto world? And Tia basically says he's pretty much the same way that he was back then, but she does give us this interesting piece of information that when she was in Europe with Megumi, she did see a kid who looked exactly like Zatch, but she got really bad vibes from him. She thought he was a big jerk, so she didn't want to go anywhere near him. Interesting. Kyo and Zatch run off to England to visit Kyo's father, but Kyo's father gets kidnapped and they have to fight a Momoto in order to rescue him. So that's a thing that happens in volume 5, but post-battle, and I'm running through this a little bit quickly because there's a lot that happens. Post-battle, Kyo's father acknowledges how much Kyo has grown up and how much he's changed. And you see this look of pride on his father's face, and it was something that was I liked seeing, because again, Kyo doesn't get to see his dad that much. So this moment where we get to see where Seitaro Takamine has pride in his son and how much he's grown. It's nice to see that character development begin for Kyo. So that was something that I really enjoyed in volume 5. So after the battle, Seitaro Takamine and Kyo are talking, and again, they're trying to uncover more about Zatch's mystery. Seitaro Takamine tells Kyo and Zatch about the forest where they found Zatch, and Kyo and Zatch decide that's a great place to start. So they go to the forest where Zatch was found. Once they get there, once they wander through the forest a little bit, they happen upon this really large crater, and Zatch he starts shivering, he starts crying, he says that he's cold. And then Zatch kind of has like an avatar state moment where his whole body just starts glowing and he can't hear Kyo, he can't respond. He's like not quite in control of what's going on. Once Zatch comes out of it, he has some memories back. Not memories of the Momoto world, but memories of the beginnings of his time in the human world. He tells Kyo that he remembers playing with the animals during the day and making friends with them, but the night was really hard because at the nighttime he was scared and it was dark and he was alone. And then Evil Zatch shows up. I know his name, and anyone who's finished the series knows his name, but for those of you who don't, we're just gonna call him Evil Zatch until we know his name. So Zatch offers his evil clone some acorns, some nuts that he's gathered, and Evil Zatch just smacks them out of his hand. on, the Zatch clone is about to burn Zatch's book, but he decides that just be too nice. He decides he's going to erase Zatch's memories, because if Zatch doesn't have any memories or any knowledge of why he's here in the human world, then he's not going to know about the battle, he's not going to know about the fight, and he's just going to be constantly attacked from enemies on all sides. So the Zatch clone decides that this is what he's going to do. Keep in mind, Zatch doesn't know who this Mamoto is. He just knows that there's this terrifying shadowy figure standing above him, threatening to erase his memories. Now the Zatch clone is successful in this attempt because Zatch had no memories. So like I said, Zatch doesn't know who this person is. He still doesn't have his memories back from the Mamoto world, but whatever just happened triggered Zatch's fourth spell appearing in his book. And before we close out volume 5, we get a view of evil Zatch. And yup, he looks just like Zatch without the joy, the love, the compassion. Basically, this kid looks like Zatch without the fruits of the spirit. And that wraps up volume 5. I did speed through it a little bit because there's a lot to cover between volume 6, 7, and 8, and some of the things that were in volume 5 were a bit fillerish, so I wanted to get us to the meat and potatoes of it. So let's jump into volume 6. Volume 6 is an interesting one and probably one of my earlier favorites. In volume 6 we meet Yopopo, a Mamoto whose spells revolve around music and musical notes, and he speaks primarily through repeating his name and different variations of his name. His partner Gem is an interesting one. First of all, Gem is a child, a literal child, but she also hates Yopopo, and she says she hates Yopopo, and she doesn't want anything to do with him. We start to see how the Mamoto battle is not just affecting the Mamotos and their partners, but also their families and the world surrounding them. The reason Gem doesn't like her Mamoto is because when he sings and when he dances, it lures other Mamoto. And one of the Mamoto that was lured to them ended up hurting Gem's mother and Gem's father. So Gem resents Yopopo in a way because of the damage that not necessarily he, but another Mamoto that he lured to them unintentionally caused to her family. It also goes to the point as we get to see how much the rest of the world or other people are affected by the Mamoto battle. Also goes to show that not all Mamoto are like Tia or Zatch or Kanshime. A lot of these Mamoto, and even sometimes their partners, genuinely don't care about the harm that they're causing to other people. They're just in it to win, and nobody else really matters. The four of them sit down to have a picnic. They don't reveal that they're Mamoto, that Zatch is a Mamoto at all, which also goes to show that there's some Mamoto who genuinely don't really care about fighting. They're there and they'll fight if they have to, but their primary aim, their primary goal right now is not to fight. Yes, we hear Zatch talk a lot about how he wants to become a kind king, but he doesn't go out of his way to look for a fight like Sherry and Brago might. It's not a criticism, it's just a note. There are some Mamoto who, will go out of their way to find fights because they're trying to end this quickly. They got things to do, like Sherry and Brago, and then there's other Mamotos like Zatch who are more passive. They don't go looking for a fight. If the fight comes to them, okay. And if there's someone who's arguably going out of the way to hurt other people, they will intervene. But if it's two Mamoto and they're just chilling, we're good. Yopopo starts singing and dancing, and lo and behold, the monster Krabby Patty shows up. Zatch and Kyo end up helping Gem and Yopopo defeat the mutant Krabby Patty, but in the process of doing this, Yopopo's book does go up in flames, which we know means he's being sent back to the Mamoto world. As his book is burning and as he's starting to fade away, Gem begins to apologize for how awful of a book owner she's been and how she should have been a better friend to him. And it's hard to watch that. Even as an adult, some of these things still pull at my, tug at the heart a little bit. In the middle of the battle with the monster Krabby Patty, Kyo is desperately trying to get Zatch's fourth spell out of the book. The words are there, but when he reads it, nothing happens. So in a last-ditch attempt to help defeat the monster Krabby Patty, he's literally begging the book to give Yopopo a chance, to give them a chance to win, and then finally, with all of his emotion and energy put into it, we get to see Zatch's fourth spell, Bowser Kerriga, which is this frighteningly beautiful lightning dragon, and that is the only way I can describe it. And the actual design of it in the manga is just chef's kiss, cannot compare to anything else. As Gem and Yopopo are saying goodbye to each other, Yopopo says Gem's name. He says Gem. As I said earlier, Yopopo only speaks in variations of his name. So as he was saying goodbye to Gem, he said her name. So it was sad. Again, there's a lot of these moments in these series where these characters aren't around for that long, but you still feel sad for them because you know they're not going to see each other again. When the Momoto and the human get separated, that's it. And while they're in England, in Volume 6, we run into Kanchime and Fulgore, which, okay, it wasn't terrible. It was actually kind of sweet. I have to admit it. It was actually kind of sweet, and I did kind of enjoy this chapter, alright? So, Kanchime has been separated from Fulgore, which is a recurring event in this series. Fulgore really needs to get like one of those backpack leashes for Kanchime. This way he can keep a better track of him. This is not the last time that this happens in the series. It happens again and again. So yeah, Fulgore needs to, hire a nanny, get childcare or something, because he does not do a good job keeping track of Kanchime. But anyway, Kanchime has been separated from Fulgore and runs into Zatch and Kyo and asks them for help trying to find Fulgore. So they traipse all around London trying to find him. They end up in a toy store, a candy shop, and a flower shop, all trying to find Fulgore. The shopkeepers at these stores all say, well, yeah, he was here earlier, he bought this. He was here earlier, he bought this. They wind up finding Fulgore at a hospital, and Kyo starts chasing him down because Kyo thinks Fulgore is there to seduce nurses. Well, lo and behold, they happen upon Fulgore in a children's ward in the hospital, giving a private concert to a group of kids and giving out the chocolate and the flowers and the toys that he bought. Really nice moment. When Fulgore and Kanchime are given these moments to shine, they really do. My issues with them aside, and we'll get to that down the line, when they're given these moments to shine, their characters are really cool and their characters are really enjoyable. Fulgore, when we first meet him in Volume 3, is presented as this very aloof Casanova pop star. For us to see the other side of him, for us to see the other side of that coin in a hospital, giving a concert to kids, giving out presents, was just, I like that moment. So I don't, as much as I whine about Kanchime and Fulgore, and it is whining, as much as I whine about them, I do appreciate a lot of the moments that we do get with them because their characters are enjoyable a lot of the times. Back at his university, Kyo's father calls up Kyo to let him know that he's found something interesting. It is a stone tablet that looks like it has some kind of creature encased in it, and on the top of the tablet is writing that looks like it's very similar to the writing in Zatch's book. So Kyo's father calls up Kyo and says, hey, I found this thing. It might be something related to the Momoto world, but I'm sure it's not going to play a part in the plot later. I'm sure it has absolutely no significance whatsoever. We also check back in with Sherry and Brago, which is always great. They are in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and Brago is having a staring contest with an alligator. That is until the alligator roars at Brago, and Brago just uppercuts him. Just right hooks him in the face. An alligator. When Brago talks about how strong he is and how everyone should be scared of him, it comes off as really cocky, but he just punched an alligator. We cut to a panel with Sherry, who's still in her dress, who's suited for a meeting with Queen Victoria, sitting by a campfire and absolutely loses it when Brago brings back a whole alligator to her. Brago starts yelling at Sherry that she shouldn't be cooking her meat because if you cook it, it loses its nutrition and you're not going to gain as much strength, and Brago is a lot to deal with sometimes, but we love him for it. Brago and Sherry start talking, and they talk about how they're having trouble finding the Momoto, and Brago says that he feels like the Momoto is just trying to avoid a fight with him. As they're on this journey trying to find this Momoto, we get a little bit of a monologue from Brago, and he's complaining about having to team up with a weak human in battle, and that he doesn't really need Sherry, and that he could probably do better, or he would have become king by now if he didn't have to team up with a weak human. When I said last video that Brago doesn't like having to rely on anything else, Sherry is included in that. He does not want to have to rely on Sherry to help him win the battle, to read his spells. Brago just really wants to do it by himself. And as this is happening, we get flashbacks, and I'm going to put a slight trigger warning here. If conversations about child abuse and self-deletion are triggering to you, please skip to the timestamp here. We get a few panels of Sherry kneeling with this girl on the sidewalk. This girl is Sherry's best friend Coco, who's just been roughed up because people accuse her of stealing from a fruit vendor. So Sherry consoles her during that time. Back at Sherry's mansion, she's talking with her butler Albert about what a positive influence Sherry's friend Coco was on her life. And then Sherry is informed that that Coco just received a scholarship to a prestigious university. So Sherry, being the good friend that she is, wants to go congratulate Coco. So she and Albert go off to go see Coco, and her entire village is on fire. And this is where, again, I have to applaud Raikou for a lot of his craft work and the way that he plots things out, because there's so many things that are being woven together here. I have to sit here and wonder, okay, how did he plan all of this out? Because there's so many things that are woven together. There's so many moving pieces. There's so many characters who we're seeing, then we're not seeing, then they're coming back later. I really appreciate the writing and the plot and the plotting in this story. So Sherry runs into the burning village to try and find Coco, and sees Coco standing surrounded by flames, holding a book. It turns out that this fire was Coco's doing. Well, not directly Coco's doing. This fire is actually the fault of this garbage sack of atoms and molecular matter, the worst thing to ever exist on the planet, Zophis. He is controlling Coco. He is a Momoto and has manipulated Coco's mind into being his partner. So Zophis has manipulated Coco into doing all these awful and horrible things. So now Sherry's unwavering ferocity and unwavering desire that we saw when she first encountered Zatch and Kyo makes sense, because this battle for her is not simply about making Brago king of the Momoto world. She has personal stakes in this because her best friend is being manipulated and controlled by a Momoto, and she can't do anything about it unless this Momoto gets sent back to the Momoto world. So now Sherry's drive makes sense. So again, this is what I mean where I said everything pays off in the end when it comes to this manga, and I really appreciate it. In the middle of this battle, we also get flashbacks to Sherry's childhood, and we see how she met Coco. And how did she meet Coco? Well, Sherry, at the tender age of 8, tried to throw herself off a bridge into a river, and Coco rescued her. We learn that Sherry comes from a prestigious and well-off family, and anything less than perfection was harshly punished. We see her doing various types of activities and not succeeding at them, and her mother or a teacher standing over her shoulder. In the anime, in the anime, there's actually a shot of her trying to solve these math problems. Now, like I said, around this time, Sherry is about the age of 8. So, teacher context here. The math that she is doing in these scenes is 7th grade level math. Here's a screenshot from the Khan Academy 7th grade curriculum, just so you can compare. Now, I'm all for kids progressing at their own level and doing things when they're ready for them, but Sherry, at 8 here, is clearly not having a good time and not enjoying herself. So, after all of this, we see her standing with her mother, and her mother says that she wishes she'd never been born. So, and the next thing we see is Sherry try to throw herself off a bridge into the river. Sherry is rescued by Coco. This is the first time these two meet. And Coco tells Sherry that she has to hold on. She has to hold on to the hope that she's going to see the light, and she has to hold on because if she doesn't hold on, she's never going to be able to experience she's never going to be able to experience happiness when she grows up. This is one of those things that I think when I was watching the anime when I was a kid didn't impact me on the level it does now, but as an adult who's lived a lot more life than I had at 12, this definitely hits me on a deeper level than it did when I was a kid. In the middle of this battle with Tree Stump, Sherry is having all these flashbacks, the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her mother, to when she met Coco, to when she found Coco in the middle of the burning village, and this is all fueling her desire to, defeat this Momoto. Brago and Sherry end up defeating Tree Stump, the Momoto, but in all this, it's completely wiped out Sherry, and she is passed out on the ground. Brago's not happy about this. Brago takes off his cape, puts it over her, picks her up, and then starts complaining more about how it's a curse to have to team up with a weak human. And then finally, towards the end of Volume 6, we meet another fan favorite. We meet Ponygon. Ponygon is a horse-like Momoto who definitely deserves his own plush at Build-A-Bear. You can't look at this guy and tell me that I'm wrong. Anyway, Ponygon was a bit of a stowaway, somehow snuck back with Zatch and Kyo, snuck back to England with Zatch and Kyo. He runs to Zatch and starts licking Zatch and playing with Zatch, indicating that Ponygon probably knew Zatch back in the Momoto world, but Zatch doesn't know that. Ponygon loves all of Kyo's friends, but Kyo not so much. He bites Kyo multiple times in this chapter. Kyo, after being bitten by Ponygon and figuring that it's probably going to be dangerous to have another Momoto around, decides that it's going to be best if he sends Ponygon away. So he kicks Ponygon out, and It's actually Tia who convinces Kyo to let Ponygon stay. Tia explains to Kyo how scared and alone she was when she didn't have Megumi and when she didn't have her book owner, so she knows how Ponygon must feel because he also doesn't have a book owner yet. So she knows how alone he feels, she knows how scared he feels. She gets Kyo to sympathize with him a little bit, and eventually Kyo decides to let Ponygon stay with them. I do have to point out that Ponygon's name is not actually Ponygon. It's Schneider. He, like Yopopo, doesn't really vocalize or say a lot, so all he says is Meru Meru Mi. He doesn't say anything else. So, in that, he can't tell Kyo and everyone else that his name is Schneider, so Kyo names him Ponygon because, and I quote, "You're like a horse, and I wanted you gone." I know I said there was a lot of character development with Kyo, but he really is still a jerk sometimes. Volume 7 brings us 2 new Momoto. We get Danny, whose power allows him to heal, which is great in a battle like this. Danny is a teenage Momoto who will probably go around saying "okay boomer," and if he wasn't a Momoto, would try and become TikTok's next biggest star. Danny and Zatch, while they meet, they don't fight. They kind of have a little bit of a scuffle at first because Danny knows Zatch is a Momoto and he thinks he's there to attack him, but Zatch is just trying to find this art exhibit. So after Danny realizes that Zatch really doesn't pose a threat to him, he gives him a snack and kind of pats him on the head and says, "Good boy." Danny has been trusted by his book owner to protect this statue, this precious statue. Zatch decides that he's going to help Danny. When people try to steal the statue, in which they are partially successful, Danny and Zatch have to team up to get it back. In his final act, Danny decides that he's going to protect the statue, so he sacrifices himself and his right to the throne of being king of the Momoto world in order to protect the statue. And for the second time in the series, the first one being Kalulu, Zatch has to do something that ends up sending one of his friends back to the Momoto world. Again, I think I made a joke in the thumbnail of my last video where I said all these kids need therapy, and that's because these kids are going through a lot. Like, jeez! The point I would like to make is, even though we didn't get to spend a lot of time with Danny's a character that also feels very real. The way he acts sometimes with his attitude, I could swap him out for one of my students and there would be no difference. I have had students who have acted exactly like Danny. These characters feel very real. Even though these characters are not humans, we're still able to connect with them. We also get introduced to Rops. Rops is another really adorable character design. He looks like a giant ladybug and everyone loves him. So Rops, like Ponygon and like Yopopo, can only speak in certain phrases, so Rops says caw caw. That's what he vocalizes. Rops' partner Apollo, and although he's the partner, doesn't really care about who becomes king of the Momoto world. He's just happy he has Rops because Rops is a great traveling buddy. Apollo, who's slated to take over his family's company, doesn't really want to do so and just wants to travel the world before he sells his soul to the capitalist overlords. Really appreciate what Raikou did with all of these characters because they're relatable. We can connect with them even though some of them might not be around for that long. These characters, even the minor ones, have fully fleshed out motivations and desires, and it's just really good to see that the characters, that even though they're not major characters, got a lot of attention. So it doesn't bother me when we get downtime with these characters, even the minor ones, because they're easily identifiable and relatable for us as readers. Zatch and Rops end up having a bit of a battle, but Kyo and Apollo call a truce because they are both completely wiped out. We learn that Rops wants to be a king of freedom, so you see that each of these Momoto kind of have something they're fighting for. Zatch is fighting to be a kind king, Rops is fighting to be a king of freedom, so each of these Momoto have their own thing that they want when they ascend to the throne. Kyo and Apollo end up sitting down and discussing some of the finer intricacies of the book. One of the things they talked about is how the book taps into the tension, the raw power that the human brings with them to these battles, and channels that and lets it loose in the form of spells, which explains why that last Bowser Care got absolutely wiped Kyo out. Volume 7 brought us a couple of new Momoto, and even though Danny wasn't around for a really long time, he was still a Momoto that a lot of fans enjoyed and were sad to see go. And Rops, who is just perfectly adorable and cool to be around, and Apollo, who, again, as an adult, when I was 12 and I was in middle school, okay, Apollo doesn't want to, work at his father's family business. But as an adult, I can certainly understand his desire to not enter the workforce just yet and spend a little time traveling the world and seeing what's out there for him. So I did enjoy Volume 7. Is it one of my favorites? No, but did I enjoy it? Yes. And then we get to volume 8, which is where I have to do I love this series with my entire heart, but just because I love this series, does that mean it's above criticism? Absolutely not. Before I get into this, I'm going to acknowledge that this isn't a Zatch Bell exclusive issue. This is an issue that exists within a lot of manga and a lot of anime. Lupa's character design. Wholly racist caricature. There's nothing else I can really say to describe this character design. Makes it really hard to get into this part of the story because this character design is just disgusting. And I'm not going to apologize for saying that. And before someone comes at me and says, but she's supposed to look physically unappealing, you realize how saying that makes it worse though, right? There's only a handful of black characters in Zatch Bell, and some of the other ones that we see, like Aleshi, who's light-skinned as heck, don't get the same treatment. They get a more respectful character design. So it's... Lupa's character design, it's not even a matter of I don't like it. There are plenty of character designs in this show that I don't like. This is just straight up racist. And like I said, I acknowledge that it's not just Zatch Bell. I acknowledge that it's an issue in anime and manga across the board. I ended up skimming through the first half of volume 8, partially because this character's design just makes it hard to get into the story. I don't want to look at this. I really don't. A lot of what happens in the first half is very filler. The Momoto that she has is obnoxious and arrogant as heck. You hear me talk about Kanchime sometimes, but this kid, no. You do get some downtime with Zatch and Kyo and Tia and Megumi at the end of the first half of volume 8, which is nice because it's good to see the kids actually being kids. It's good to see them playing and on amusement park rides and having picnics. I like this. Give me more of this. But at the back half of volume 8, we get possibly the greatest forbidden love story since Romeo and Juliet. We get introduced to Wanrei and Lien. Wanrei is a teenage Momoto whose abilities revolve around martial arts and energy in a way. I'm not really quite sure how to describe it. Wanrei's desire is to become a king who protects everyone. Zatch and Kyo run into his book owner Lien in Japan when Lien is trying to find someone who can help her rescue Wanrei. Wanrei has been kidnapped by Lien's father because Lien's father believes that Wanrei isn't good for her and is only going to cause her trouble, but Lien does not care. She wants to be with her man. So she enlists the help. She runs into Zatch and Kyo, steals Zatch and Kyo's book, then apologizes for stealing the book and begs them to help her rescue Wanrei. And they do. In the most soap opera thing to ever happen in this series, Lien, Zatch, and Kyo travel to the island where Lien's father is holding Wanrei. There's already another Momoto there waiting for them because of course there is. We can never have anything easy in this series. Lien runs to Wanrei's cell. Zatch and Kyo try and hold off the Momoto. Lien begs Wanrei to come out and fight, and Wanrei tells Lien that he doesn't love her and that she shouldn't be here and to go away. Lien, in true Juliet fashion, who is willing to die for Wanrei, straight up just throws herself in front of his cage, stands in front of it. Wanrei tries to convince her to not do that, but Lien's like, well, if you don't love me, then why do you care? Zatch and Kyo start yelling to Wanrei to snap out of it, and if he truly loves Lien, then how dare he hurt her like this? Well, that pretty much does it. Wanrei busts out of his cuffs, throws his book to Lien, and quite literally punches his way out of his cell. He promises to protect Lien until the end of time, but first he has to deal with the Momoto who called her worthless. Wanrei just full on just jumps into don't talk about my woman, what you say about her mode, and I love it. I love it. I love Wanrei and Lien together. I don't think I appreciated it so much as a kid because I think I found the romance aspect of it kind of boring, but as an adult, yeah, no, I love this. I also love that we're building this roster of comrades and allies that Zatch and Kyo have. It started with Kanchime, and then it was Tia, and now it's Wanrei. So we're kind of building these people that Zatch knows that he can rely on. He at the end talks to Wanrei and asks him what kind of king that does he want to be, and Wanrei tells him that he wants to be a protecting king. And that's the kind of king that Zatch can vibe with, so it's okay. We're building this roster, this team of Momoto that Zatch can rely on, and there's still other Momoto who are part of that team who we haven't met yet, who we're going to meet next time. Totally apologize for the complete fool that I'm gonna make of myself in the next video, where I will be covering volumes 9, 10, and 11. So that wraps it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have you watched Zatch Bell? Have you read Zatch Bell? If not, why not? Please go do that. Give a like, give a subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I will see everyone in the next video. Bye!